Hello, class. I hope everyone had a great weekend. I know I did. Now that we're all in our seats, we can start where we left off on Friday. I hope you're all ready and you brought your sweaters. It's time for us to learn a little bit more about the Cold War. The Cold War began at the end of World War II in 1945. Once Japan formally surrendered at the beginning of September, the last two global superpowers that emerged from the rubble were the United States and the Soviet Union. These two countries fought for 4 decades in covert operations. The Cold War lasted throughout the 1950s to the 1980s and ended in 1991. Many people still consider the end of the Cold War the reunification of Germany in 1989 as the Berlin Wall fell. However, historians agree that the dissolution of the USSR in '91 marks the end of the Cold War era. Now, I know I've told you when the Cold War began and when it ended, and we went over it last week, but here are a few events from the last couple decades that over the Cold War can help you give a better idea of what it was about. One example in the 1950s I can give you is the Cuban Revolution. In 1959, Fidel Castro assumed power in Cuba after winning a war with rebel forces. After aligning with the USSR in communist ideology and an American trade embargo, Cuba began funding wars across the world with money supporting communism. In 1965, the USA's involvement in the war between southern and northern Vietnam began when President Lyndon B. Johnson oversaw the deployment of over 150,000 troops. The USSR and China funded the northern side of Vietnam while the US supported the southern side. In 1979, the Iranian hostage crisis occurred, in which Iranian students took over the American embassy in support of the revolution, which wanted to oust the current pro-Western ruler in Iran. This event did not even end until 1981, when President Jimmy Carter finalized negotiations to release the hostages. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell after dividing Germany into East and West since 1961. Like I said earlier, this event is seen by many as the symbolic end to the war. The eastern side was finally allowed to visit the western side for the first time in 28 years. The ending of the Cold War, according to historians, was symbolized by the collapse of the USSR in 1991, as mentioned before. This split up many territories that were part of the USSR into their own countries, the largest being Russia. The United States remained the lone global superpower after this war of the battle of ideologies had finally ended after 40 years. Now it's your turn. I'm going to place the class in 4 groups, and each group is going to be given a decade ranging from the 1950s to the 1980s. You're going to work with your group to make a video that aims to capture the influence the Cold War had on the United States during your decade. Now, remember everyone, your video should be educational and entertaining. You should make sure that your facts are accurate and they pertain to your decade. And above all, remember to have fun, okay guys?
Created using Powtoon.